I've been asked to sing at her funeral, which I consider to be an incredible honor. I mean, I've been invited to the funeral.
For years, Elton John's extraordinary friendship with Princess Diana has remained one of Britain's most fascinating royal mysteries. Their bond was deeply personal, publicly celebrated, and yet surrounded by moments the palace rarely discussed. Now, decades later, Elton John has finally opened up about Diana in a way that has left many people stunned. What did he really know about her private struggles, and why have some details remained unspoken for so long? As his revelations come to light, a much darker and more emotional story begins to emerge. But what could Elton John's disclosure about Lady Diana be? How serious could it be to have left Britain stunned? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. To help us create more videos and uncover the latest royal drama, please subscribe. The night Diana met Elton. So Elton John and Princess Diana didn't become friends because some royal aide introduced them, or because they were expected to get along. Their friendship began in a much simpler way, with laughter, a little dancing, and two people who seemed to recognize something familiar in each other almost immediately. And what makes their story so moving is that this joyful beginning would eventually lead to a painful period of distance, followed by a tragedy neither of them could have imagined. Their story began in the summer of 1981, just as Britain was preparing for the much-anticipated wedding of Prince Charles and Diana Spencer. Elton was already a familiar face around royal circles. He had performed for members of the royal family and attended private events, but despite his enormous fame, he didn't always feel completely comfortable in that world. Royal life could be formal, careful, and full of invisible rules. Elton was almost the opposite. Then came Prince Andrew's 21st birthday celebration at Windsor Castle. Elton was sitting at the piano, entertaining the guests, when Diana walked into the room. She was not yet Princess Diana. She was simply Diana Spencer, a young woman whose life was about to change dramatically. But Elton noticed her almost immediately. What happened next was surprisingly natural. They started talking, joking about the orchestra and laughing together. Before long, the two were playfully copying the Charleston on the dance floor. It was spontaneous, carefree, and perhaps exactly the kind of behavior one wouldn't expect inside Windsor Castle. Even Queen Elizabeth II was reportedly amused by their antics. For Elton, something about Diana felt strangely familiar. He later described the feeling as if he had known her for years, and perhaps Diana felt something similar. She was standing on the edge of a completely new life. Soon, every dress she wore, every word she spoke, and almost every expression on her face would be watched by the public. The freedom of ordinary life was slowly slipping away. Elton offered something completely different. He was outspoken, funny, unconventional, and unafraid to be himself. Around him, Diana didn't have to behave like the future Princess of Wales. She could simply laugh, joke, dance, and be Diana. That became the heart of their friendship. Elton John and Princess Diana developed a deeply personal friendship built on humor, affection, and a shared understanding of life under relentless public attention. Despite their very different worlds, both found comfort in someone who understood the loneliness of fame and scrutiny. Their bond later endured disagreement and silence, but Diana's tragic death transformed their friendship forever. What began as a simple connection over laughter and music became a powerful relationship shaped by distance, tragedy, and enduring loss. But what kind of bond resulted from the spontaneous dance? How close did they become? What did they have in common? Let's find out. Behind Diana and Elton's friendship. Behind all the royal ceremonies, flashing cameras, and endless headlines, Princess Diana had a friendship with Elton John that was far more personal than most people ever saw. To the public, they were two incredibly famous people who occasionally appeared together at glamorous events. But away from the cameras, something much deeper was happening. Diana and Elton understood a side of fame that very few people could understand. They both knew what it felt like to walk into a room and instantly become the center of attention, while privately wishing they could simply disappear. Diana had a remarkable gift for making other people feel safe and understood. Yet, ironically, she often struggled to find that same comfort for herself. Her troubled marriage to Prince Charles, the constant attention from photographers, and the strict demands of royal life left her under enormous emotional pressure. Elton understood that feeling. Behind his colorful clothes, huge personality, and worldwide success were his own battles with addiction, insecurity, and the crushing weight of celebrity. That shared understanding brought them unusually close. And then there was the AIDS crisis, which revealed something important about Diana's character. At a time when the disease was surrounded by fear, misunderstanding, and cruel stigma, Diana did something that shocked many people. She visited AIDS patients, sat beside them, and famously showed them compassion when others were afraid to even touch them. Elton saw this as more than a royal appearance. He saw courage. Diana was willing to risk criticism because she believed frightened and suffering people deserved kindness. For Elton, that showed that underneath the royal title was a woman who genuinely cared about people. But their friendship wasn't always deep conversations and serious struggles. They laughed together too. Diana could tease Elton about his dramatic clothes, while Elton loved her playful sense of humor. Around each other, they could forget the stiffness of royal life and simply have fun. Still, there was something much deeper beneath those laughs. Diana was dealing with intense loneliness, emotional pain, insomnia, and an eating disorder. Elton had his own difficult history and knew what it meant to struggle while millions of people believed your life was perfect. That may have been the real secret of their friendship. They didn't need to explain everything to each other. They already understood what it meant to be famous and still feel completely alone. Away from the crowds. Diana didn't have to be the perfect princess. Elton didn't have to be the flamboyant superstar. For a few precious moments, they could simply be Diana and Elton, two friends laughing, talking, teasing each other, and quietly understanding the pain hidden behind the fame. And perhaps that is what made their friendship so special. In a world where everyone wanted something from them, they gave each other something incredibly rare: the freedom to take off the mask. What is that remarkable attribute that Elton disclosed about Princess Diana? How was he able to identify the attribute? Stay with us. The night Diana stole everyone's attention. So, Elton John had seen Princess Diana in countless social situations, but one particular evening convinced him that there was something about her that went far beyond beauty, fame, or even being a princess. In his autobiography, Elton described Diana as having what seemed like a rare kind of social magic. She could walk into a room filled with powerful people and somehow make everyone feel completely at ease. Despite her royal status, she did not always behave like someone who expected special treatment. Instead, she could joke, laugh, listen, and talk to almost anyone, as though they had known each other for years. And according to Elton, men noticed. He became so familiar with this phenomenon that he referred to it as the Diana effect. Men who were normally confident, successful, and completely comfortable in the spotlight could suddenly become much more interested in winning Diana's attention. One evening, Elton said, he witnessed an especially memorable example. At a dinner gathering, two of Hollywood's biggest stars, Richard Gere and Sylvester Stallone, were both present. And before long, Diana's presence seemed to change the entire mood of the room. According to Elton's account, both actors became fascinated by Diana. What began as ordinary conversation reportedly developed into something much more intense. Each appeared eager to capture her attention, and the situation became so uncomfortable that it nearly turned into a confrontation. Think about that for a moment. These were not shy strangers. Gere and Stallone were internationally famous actors, men accustomed to having people compete for their attention. Yet Elton remembered them as becoming almost like two teenagers, trying to impress the same girl. Eventually, Stallone reportedly walked away angrily. Elton recalled him complaining that he would never have attended the dinner if he had known Gere would be there. It sounds almost unbelievable, but that was precisely what fascinated Elton about Diana. Her appeal, in his telling, wasn't simply about her appearance. Diana had warmth. She had humor. She knew how to listen, and she had an unusual ability to make people feel noticed. She could make someone feel important without making it obvious that she was doing it. That may have been her greatest gift. Diana didn't seem to demand attention. Somehow, attention simply followed her. And that was what made her so captivating. Men who were normally surrounded by admirers could suddenly find themselves wanting her approval instead. Even people who had spent their entire lives being watched could become fascinated by watching her. For Elton John, the dinner involving Gere and Stallone became one of the clearest examples of what he believed made Diana so extraordinary. She could enter a room without asking anyone to notice her, and somehow, before long, everyone was noticing her. What challenged the bond shared by Diana and Elton? Who was really at fault? How long did the rift last? Keep watching. The friendship that fell apart. All right, by 1996, Elton John and Princess Diana had become much more than famous acquaintances. They had developed a friendship built on something surprisingly rare in their worlds: trust. They could laugh together, speak openly, and understand the strange pressures that came with being constantly watched by the public. Elton admired Diana's compassion, while Diana valued the honesty she found in him. But then, almost without warning, that friendship began to fall apart. Elton John was preparing a major photography book celebrating some of rock music's biggest stars. But the project meant much more to him than entertainment. It was also helping raise awareness and support for AIDS research and education, a cause he cared deeply about. Diana had agreed to write the foreword, and Elton was genuinely moved. Her participation seemed to him like a powerful sign that she was willing to use her royal position to support compassion and important causes, even when they challenged traditional expectations. Then, unexpectedly, Diana withdrew. According to reports, palace advisors had objected to photographs in the book featuring semi-nude male models, believing the material was inappropriate for someone so closely associated with the royal family. Elton, however, saw the situation differently. Because Diana had become a close friend, her withdrawal felt deeply personal. He was reportedly hurt and disappointed, and made his feelings known. According to Elton John's later recollection, Diana responded to their disagreement with a cold letter, after which their communication suddenly stopped. The timing made the situation even more painful. In August 1996, Diana's divorce from Prince Charles had been finalized, officially ending a troubled chapter of her life. She was attempting to create a new identity outside the royal system while dealing with relentless media attention and enormous personal pressure. Elton found their sudden distance deeply painful, but he later wondered whether Diana had been influenced by palace advisors or was simply emotionally exhausted. With countless causes, responsibilities, expectations, and private struggles demanding her attention, another confrontation may have been overwhelming. Whatever the reason, their once close friendship had been painfully fractured. Two people who had once shared jokes, private conversations, and deep understanding suddenly stopped speaking. And years later, Elton admitted something important. Pride had played a part. Either of them could have made the first move. Either could have picked up the phone, apologized, or simply said, "Let's talk." But neither did. Months passed. Elton continued his music and charity work. Diana continued trying to rebuild her life and establish herself as an independent humanitarian. From the outside, both seemed busy and successful, but somewhere beneath all of that was an unfinished friendship and a wound neither had managed to close. And the tragedy was that neither of them knew just how little time they had left. Because when Elton John and Princess Diana finally crossed paths again, it would not be during another glamorous celebration or friendly private gathering. It would happen under circumstances so heartbreaking that the argument of 1996 would suddenly seem almost insignificant. Were they eventually able to mend their strained friendship? What happened to their friendship before Princess Diana's death? Stay glued. When Diana and Elton reconciled, the friendship between Princess Diana and Elton John was anything but simple. It was filled with laughter, affection, hurt feelings, misunderstanding, and, eventually, a heartbreaking goodbye. But what makes their story so moving is that, just when they found their way back to each other, time was already running out. In July 1997, the shocking murder of designer Gianni Versace left both Diana and Elton devastated. Versace had been much more than a famous designer to them. He was a friend, someone who understood the strange loneliness that could come with living constantly under the public eye. At Versace's funeral in Milan, something unexpected happened. Diana approached Elton. Whatever tension had existed between them suddenly seemed far less important. She apologized for their earlier disagreement and asked if they could become friends again, and Elton said yes. The two embraced, reconciled, and began talking about spending more time together. There was no dramatic announcement, no cameras needed to capture the moment. It was simply two friends deciding that pride had taken up enough space between them. But neither of them knew how little time they had left. Elton would later look back on those final weeks with deep regret. He felt that he had allowed pride to keep him away from Diana for too long. Perhaps, he believed, he should have called her earlier. Perhaps they could have avoided the painful distance altogether. What makes their friendship especially fascinating is that Elton saw a side of Diana that the public rarely got to see. Behind the perfect dresses, royal appearances, and endless newspaper headlines was a woman who could be hilarious, emotional, warm, honest, and surprisingly vulnerable. With Elton, she could simply be Diana, not a princess being watched by millions, but a friend laughing with another friend. And Diana influenced Elton too. Through her, he saw how enormous fame could become something useful. Public attention did not have to be only about glamour or celebrity. It could be used to highlight suffering, raise awareness, and encourage people to care about others. Their friendship was ultimately about two incredibly famous people finding something surprisingly ordinary in one another: trust, comfort, laughter, and acceptance. Sadly, their reconciliation came just weeks before Diana's death. That is what makes the story so painful. Their friendship had been wounded by pride, but they managed to repair it before it was too late, at least for a brief moment. And after Diana's death, Elton preserved her memory through music, transforming his grief into a tribute that would carry her name and spirit to millions around the world. Their friendship may have lasted only a short time, but its emotional impact has lasted far longer. How did Elton receive the news of Diana's death? How did he feel as one of the last people Diana spoke with? Stay tuned. The night before tragedy struck. So, imagine this for a moment. It is the night of August 30th, 1997, and Princess Diana is in Paris, staying at the Ritz Hotel with Dodi Fayed. Everything seems almost normal. She has plans to return to London, and like millions of people do every day, she reaches for the telephone and calls a close friend. That friend is Elton John. At the time, neither of them could possibly have imagined how important that ordinary phone call would become. Diana and Elton had shared a genuine friendship for years, one built on affection, trust, and an understanding of what it meant to live under enormous public attention. But on this particular night, there was apparently nothing dramatic about their conversation. It was simply two friends talking, and that is exactly what makes the memory so painful. Very little is publicly known about what Diana and Elton actually discussed. Elton has spoken about their final conversation only in broad terms, choosing to keep the private details private. There was no famous farewell, no warning that something terrible was about to happen, no reason for either of them to believe that they were speaking for the last time. Diana would leave the Ritz not long afterward. Shortly after midnight, she and Dodi climbed into a Mercedes and began traveling through the streets of Paris. Photographers followed their car, and the chase eventually ended in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. The crash was devastating. Diana suffered severe injuries and was taken to hospital, where doctors fought desperately to save her, but they could not. In the early hours of August 31st, Princess Diana died. For Elton John, the news was heartbreaking. he had lost not simply one of the world's most famous women, but a friend. And in the days that followed, his grief would become part of the public story of Diana's death. His emotional performance of the rewritten Candle in the Wind at her funeral would go on to become one of the most unforgettable tributes ever made to her. Yet perhaps the most haunting detail is how completely ordinary that final conversation seems to have been. There was no dramatic goodbye, no final message filled with hidden meaning. Just Diana, sitting in a hotel in Paris, speaking to someone she cared about. And then, within hours, everything changed. That is what makes the memory so difficult to forget. Elton John spoke to Diana when both of them believed there would be another conversation, another meeting, another ordinary day. Neither knew that this would be the last time they ever heard each other's voices. What seems more stunning to the entire Britain in Elton John's disclosure? What are his reflections centered upon? The Diana connection behind Elton's loyalty. So, when people talk about Elton John's connection to the British royal family, there's one person who explains almost everything: Princess Diana. According to Elton's autobiography, Me, Diana was not simply another royal acquaintance. She was probably the royal he felt closest to. From the moment they met, Elton was struck by how different she seemed. Diana had a remarkable way of making people feel at ease. She could speak to almost anyone, famous or unknown, powerful or ordinary, and somehow make them feel as though they mattered. For Elton, that quality was unforgettable, but their friendship wasn't always smooth. Like many close relationships, theirs went through difficult moments, including periods when they disagreed and grew apart. Eventually, however, they found their way back to each other. Their reconciliation came at a particularly emotional moment: the funeral of fashion designer Gianni Versace. Tragically, Elton had no idea that this would be the last time he would ever see Diana. Just weeks later, Diana was killed in a car crash in Paris. The world was devastated, but for Elton, the loss was deeply personal. At her funeral, he performed a rewritten version of Candle in the Wind, transforming the song into a heartbreaking tribute to his friend. What happened next was almost overwhelming. The performance became a global sensation and one of the most famous recordings in music history. Yet Elton later admitted that the incredible success made him uncomfortable. He believed the world's obsession with Diana's death had gone too far. The constant coverage, speculation, and fascination surrounding her final moments felt unhealthy, and he suspected Diana herself would never have wanted her death to become such a spectacle. And this is where Elton's later relationship with Prince Harry becomes especially interesting. Years afterward, when Harry and Meghan faced intense criticism over their use of a private plane, Elton publicly came to their defense. At first, it might have looked like a famous friend simply defending another famous couple. But Elton's words suggested something much deeper was happening. He spoke of feeling a profound sense of obligation to protect Harry and his family from unnecessary media intrusion. Why? Because Elton believed he had already seen what relentless press attention could do. He had watched Diana struggle under that pressure, and he believed the media frenzy surrounding her life played a role in the circumstances that ultimately led to her death. So, when Elton defended Harry, it wasn't simply about airplanes, headlines, or celebrity arguments. For him, it appeared to be personal. Harry was Diana's son, the child of the woman Elton had loved, admired, lost, and never forgotten. And perhaps, in protecting Harry from the kind of pressure Diana endured, Elton was trying to make sure that history did not repeat itself. In that sense, standing beside Harry may have been Elton's quiet way of standing beside Diana once again. So, what do you think about Elton John's final disclosure on Diana? Do you think Diana really fixed her friendship with Elton? We'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.